Black woman denied service at her own hotel. Minutes later, she sacked the entire staff. You are not allowed behind this desk. Bruce Wagner's fingers stabbed the air 6 inches from Tracey's face, close enough that she could smell the stale coffee on his breath. His voice cracked across the lobby like a whip, bouncing off polished marble floors and crystal chandeliers. "Step back immediately," he barked, "or I will have security drag you out of here in handcuffs." Tracey Dianne didn't flinch. She stood in her dark green puffer coat, a leather handbag resting calmly at her side, her natural hair pulled back in twists. Nothing about her screamed wealth. Nothing about her demanded attention. And that, apparently, was the problem. 9:47 p.m. glowed on the lobby's antique grandfather clock. In exactly 12 minutes, Bruce Wagner would learn the most expensive lesson of his career. But right now, he had no idea he was firing himself with every word that left his mouth. Before we continue, if you're already feeling this story, go ahead and smash that subscribe button and hit the bell so you don't miss what happens next. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this ends. Drop a comment right now telling me what you would do if someone treated you like this in a place you owned. Now, let's get back to it. The lobby of the Grandview Imperial Hotel was the kind of place designed to make ordinary people feel small. Vaulted ceilings soared 40 feet overhead. Italian marble stretched in every direction like a frozen lake. The reception desk was hand-carved mahogany, polished to a mirror shine, staffed by employees trained to smile at the right people. Tracey, apparently, was not the right people. "I asked a simple question," she said, her voice low and controlled. "I'd like to speak with management about the service complaints filed this quarter." Bruce laughed, a sharp, theatrical sound meant for the audience forming around them. 2 men in tailored suits exchanged uncomfortable glances. An elderly woman clutched her pearls near the elevator bank. A younger guest, maybe late 20s, had already lifted her phone, the camera light blinking red. "Service complaints?" Bruce repeated loudly, playing to the crowd. "Ma'am, I am management. And the only complaint I'm seeing right now is standing in front of me." A nervous giggle escaped from one of the front desk clerks. Tracey's grip tightened slightly around her bag. She noticed everything, the way the bellhop avoided eye contact, the way the concierge suddenly became fascinated with his computer screen, the way security had materialized behind Bruce like shadows. "I understand you're busy," Tracey said evenly, "but I'm asking one last time to be treated with basic respect." Bruce stepped closer, lowering his voice to that condescending whisper men use when they think they're being reasonable. "Respect is earned, sweetheart, and you don't waltz into a 5-star establishment dressed like that." His eyes raked over her coat, her simple gold necklace, her practical shoes, and start making demands. The word sweetheart hung in the air like a slap. This is a private establishment," he continued, louder now, making sure everyone heard. "We cater to a certain clientele, Fortune 500 executives, foreign dignitaries, people who belong here." He gestured at the grandeur surrounding them. "Look around. You see anyone else here who looks like they just wandered in off the street?" Tracey's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes, a calculation, a decision being made. She had walked through hundreds of lobbies like this one across the United States. She had sat at tables where men twice her age underestimated her. She had learned long ago that calm unsettles those who rely on intimidation. "I'm not making demands," she said quietly. "I'm observing." That word, observing, irritated him. "Observing?" Bruce's laugh was sharp and cruel. "Observing what? How hotels work? Let me educate you since you clearly need it. Guests check in, staff do their jobs, And people who don't belong here, he leaned in close. They get escorted out. The phrase "don't belong" settled over the lobby like a winter frost. Behind the reception desk, a young clerk named Angela shifted nervously. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, frozen. She knew this was wrong. She could feel it in her bones. But Bruce was her boss. Bruce controlled her schedule, her reviews, her future at this hotel. So Angela stayed silent. And silence, as Tracey knew, was also a choice. 9:52 p.m. The woman filming in the corner had opened Instagram Live. The viewer count climbed, 87, 156, 243. Comments flooded the screen. Is this really happening in 2025? Someone call corporate now. That woman is way too calm. She knows something. At Grandview Imperial, your staff is racist. Bruce didn't notice. He was too busy enjoying himself. I've been in luxury hospitality for 15 years, he announced, strutting slightly. 15 years of protecting establishments like this from people who don't understand how things work. You think you're the first person to try this? Walking in here with some story about complaints and questions? He shook his head with exaggerated pity. I can spot a scammer from across the lobby. The way you walk, the way you talk. That coat you're wearing, what is that? Outlet mall? The bag that's trying too hard to look expensive? He clicked his tongue. Everything about you screams wrong floor, wrong building, wrong life. Patricia Chen, the assistant night manager, emerged from the back office. Her heels clicked against the marble as she assessed the situation with one sweeping glance. Problem, Bruce? Someone trying to access employee areas and asking questions about internal documents. Bruce crossed his arms. Claims she wants to discuss service complaints. No ID, no reservation, no explanation for why she's been hovering around my staff for 20 minutes. Patricia's eyes swept over Tracey, the practical coat, the understated jewelry, the sensible shoes. Her lip curled slightly. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to leave the premises immediately. This is your final warning before we involve law enforcement. Tracey tilted her head. On what grounds? Trespassing, harassment. Take your pick. Patricia pulled out her phone. Chicago PD is on speed dial. They know us here. They respond quickly when we call. The threat hung in the air. 9:56 p.m. Tracey glanced around the lobby one final time. She saw the tension, the curiosity, the judgment. She also saw something else, recognition dawning in a few of the older guests. Women who had lived long enough to understand exactly what was happening. Women who had been in this position themselves, in different rooms, in different decades, facing different Bruces. One of them, a silver-haired woman in an elegant cream suit, caught Tracey's eye and gave an almost imperceptible nod. Don't let them win. Tracey took a breath. Steady. Grounding. I have one question, she said calmly. Bruce rolled his eyes. Make it quick. Security's getting impatient. Tracey reached into her bag. Not dramatically, not theatrically, just deliberately. She pulled out a slim leather folder and placed it gently on the mahogany counter. Bruce, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the marble lobby. Do you recognize this logo? He glanced down and froze. What Tracey pulled out of that folder would destroy Bruce Wagner's career in the next 60 seconds. But to understand why this moment mattered, why it would be remembered long after the security footage went viral, you need to understand who Tracey Dianne really was. And that story begins 30 years earlier, in a very different kind of hotel. Tracey's mother, Dorothy Dianne, had spent 31 years cleaning hotel rooms. Not fancy hotels like this one, at least, not at first. She started at a motor lodge off Interstate 55, the kind of place where the bedspreads were bolted down and the Do Not Disturb signs were ignored as a matter of policy. She worked doubles, sometimes triples, pushing a cart that weighed more than she did through hallways that smelled of cigarette smoke and regret. Tracey was 7 years old the first time she helped. Fold the corners tight, Dorothy had instructed, her hands moving with the mechanical precision of someone who had made 10,000 beds. Like you're wrapping a gift. Every room is a gift to whoever stays here next. Tracey had struggled with the sheets, her small fingers fumbling with the hospital corners. "Mama, why do we have to make it so perfect? They're just gonna mess it up again." Dorothy had stopped, knelt down, looked her daughter in the eye. "Because we know it was perfect, even if they don't notice, even if they don't care. We know." She smoothed a wrinkle from the pillowcase. "Dignity isn't about what other people see, baby. It's about what you know is true about yourself." That lesson had followed Tracey through every chapter of her life. Through the scholarship to Northwestern that her guidance counselor said she probably wouldn't get. Through the MBA program where she was one of 3 black women in a class of 200. Through her first job in hotel management, where the general manager introduced her to clients as our diversity hire. But don't worry, she's actually competent. Through the night, she signed the paperwork that made her the majority owner of a struggling boutique hotel in Detroit, the first property in what would become a quietly growing empire. She never announced her acquisitions, never sought press coverage, never walked into a property flanked by lawyers and assistants. That wasn't her style. Tracey preferred to arrive unannounced, because people reveal their true character when they think no one important is watching. And tonight, at the Grandview Imperial, she had seen exactly who Bruce Wagner was. Now hold on. Before we get to the part where Tracey reveals who she really is, I need you to do something for me. If you're invested in this story, if you're feeling Tracey's energy right now, hit that like button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Every like and share helps more people discover stories about Black excellence and standing in your power. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Click subscribe and turn on notifications because the next few minutes are about to change everything. Okay, let's keep going. You're not ready for what happens next. Bruce was still staring at the folder. The logo embossed on the cover was unmistakable. Dianne Hospitality Group, the same logo that appeared on quarterly reports, the same logo that had been quietly acquiring properties across the Midwest and Eastern Seaboard for the past decade. The same logo that, 6 months ago, had appeared on the ownership transfer documents for this very hotel. "This," Bruce's voice cracked, "this is internal documentation, confidential. How did you—" "Because I requested it," Tracey said simply. The lobby had gone completely silent. Even the background music seemed to fade. Patricia's phone hung limply in her hand, the call to the police forgotten. "My name is Tracey Dianne," she continued, her voice calm but carrying to every corner of the room. "And 6 months ago, I became the majority owner of the Grandview Imperial Hotel." Someone's phone clattered to the marble floor. Bruce's mouth opened, closed, opened again. That's not... You can't... Tracey pulled out her phone, tapped the screen, and turned it toward him. Corporate profile. Ownership documents. Her photograph next to her title. CEO and principal owner. Dianne Hospitality Group. The same face that had been standing in front of him for the past 20 minutes. The face he had called a scammer. A nobody. someone who didn't belong. "I came here tonight," Tracey said, "because this property has received 37 formal complaints in the past year. Complaints about discriminatory service, about guests being profiled based on their appearance, about a culture of hostility that starts," she looked directly at Bruce, "at the top." Bruce stumbled backward. "If we had known who you were—" "That," Tracey interrupted quietly, "is exactly the problem." She turned slightly, addressing the guests who had gathered to witness the confrontation. Her eyes found the silver-haired woman in cream, the young woman still filming, the businessmen who had watched in uncomfortable silence. "You shouldn't need to know who I am, to treat me with dignity." The words landed like stones in still water, rippling outward. Tracey opened the folder. "Bruce Wagner," she read aloud, "night manager, 23 formal complaints in 14 months, 6 written warnings, 0 corrective action taken." She looked up. "Would you like me to continue?" Bruce's face had gone the color of old paper. "There's been a misunderstanding. We can discuss this privately." "No." Tracey's voice was firm, but not unkind. "We discuss this correctly, and we discuss it here, where everyone who witnessed your behavior can also witness the consequences." She turned to the staff gathered behind the reception desk, Angela with her trembling hands, the concierge who had looked away, the bellhop who had pretended not to hear. "Every person in this lobby had a choice tonight," Tracey said. "Some of you followed orders. Some of you laughed. Some of you stayed silent." Her gaze rested briefly on Angela. "Silence is also a decision." Angela's eyes filled with tears. Tracey took a breath. "Effective immediately, Bruce Wagner is terminated from his position." The words fell like a gavel. Bruce's badge slipped from his fingers, clattering against the marble floor, the same floor where he had stood so confidently just minutes before. "Patricia Chen," Tracey continued, "your employment is also terminated, effective immediately. HR will contact you both before morning with details about severance and final documentation." Patricia's phone finally slipped from her hand, cracking against the marble. "Wait!" Bruce stepped forward, his voice breaking. "You can't. This isn't. I have rights." "You had responsibilities," Tracey corrected him. "You chose not to honor them." She turned to security. "Please escort Mr. Wagner and Ms. Chen from the building. Their personal effects will be shipped to their home addresses." As Bruce was led toward the door, he turned back one final time. His face was a mask of disbelief, anger, and something else. The dawning recognition of a man watching his entire world collapse. "This isn't over," he managed. Tracey met his gaze evenly. "Yes, it is." The lobby doors closed behind him, and the room let out a collective breath. Bruce Wagner had been waiting 15 years for a moment like this. Not this specific moment, of course. Not the woman in the green coat with the calm eyes and the irritating composure. But a moment where his authority would be tested publicly, visibly, in front of guests who needed to see how a real manager handled problems. He had risen through the ranks of luxury hospitality the hard way. Night shifts at a Holiday Inn in his 20s. Assistant manager at a Marriott where the general manager took credit for every success and blamed Bruce for every failure. Years of watching less qualified people with connections, with family money, with the right look, get promoted over him. When the Grandview Imperial finally made him night manager 3 years ago, Bruce had made himself a promise. No one would ever make him feel small again. And no one had. He had handled the drunk congressman who threatened to have him fired. He had handled the reality TV star who threw a champagne glass at a bellhop. He had handled the tech billionaire's wife, who demanded her room be re-cleaned 4 times in one night. Handled was Bruce's favorite word. It meant controlled, managed, dominated. The complaints? He handled those too. 23 formal complaints in 14 months, each one filed by guests who didn't understand how luxury hospitality worked. Guests who expected 5-star treatment without 5-star behavior. Guests who, and Bruce would never say this out loud, but he thought it constantly, simply didn't fit the Grandview's clientele. The written warnings from corporate, filed and forgotten. HR was 3 states away. The regional director visited once a year, always announced, always during daylight hours when Bruce wasn't even on shift. Nobody saw what happened after midnight. Nobody saw who Bruce really was. "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you one more time." Bruce stepped closer to Tracey, close enough to invade her space, close enough to make her uncomfortable. This was a technique he had perfected. The slow advance, the lowered voice, the implicit threat of physical proximity. Most people backed up. She didn't. "You've been hovering around my staff for over 20 minutes, Bruce continued, his voice carrying across the marble. "Asking questions, making them uncomfortable, disrupting operations." "I asked for basic information," Tracey said quietly. "I was denied. I asked why. I was ignored." "Because you're not a guest." Bruce let the words drip with condescension. "And even if you were, we reserve the right to refuse service to anyone." Several guests shifted uncomfortably. Behind the reception desk, Angela's hands hovered frozen over her keyboard. She had seen Bruce do this before. The escalation, the public humiliation, the absolute certainty that he was untouchable. She had watched guests leave in tears. She had watched colleagues quit rather than report him. She had stayed silent every single time. But something about tonight felt different. The woman in the green coat wasn't crying, wasn't backing down, wasn't doing any of the things Bruce's targets usually did. Angela caught Bruce's eye and gave the smallest shake of her head. "Don't." Bruce ignored her completely. "You know what I think?" He turned to address the growing crowd of onlookers playing to his audience. "I think we've got ourselves a professional victim here. Someone who walks into establishments like this hoping, praying for exactly this kind of interaction." He gestured at Tracey's coat, her bag, her shoes. "Look at her, dressed like she's going to the grocery store, standing in a lobby that costs more per night than she probably makes in a month. And now she wants to cry discrimination? Please." The word discrimination landed like a slap. Tracey's expression didn't change, but Bruce finally noticed, that she wasn't intimidated, wasn't angry, wasn't any of the things his targets usually were by this point in his performance. She was watching him, observing. That word again, it crawled under his skin. "You think you're clever," Bruce said, lowering his voice. "You think standing there all calm and collected makes you look dignified? It doesn't. It makes you look delusional." Security had moved closer now. Marcus Thompson stood 3 feet behind Bruce, his massive frame casting a shadow across the marble floor. 2 other officers flanked the reception desk, their presence meant to intimidate. Tracey glanced at them briefly, then returned her attention to Bruce. "Can I ask you something?" The question was so simple, so conversational, that Bruce almost laughed. "Sure. Ask away. I've got all night to educate you." Tracey tilted her head slightly. "How many complaints have been filed against this hotel in the past year?" Bruce's smile flickered. "What? Complaints. Formal complaints. Submitted to corporate. Tracey's voice remained perfectly calm. Guest complaints about discriminatory service, about profiling, about hostile treatment from management. The lobby seemed to contract around them. "I don't know what you're talking about," Bruce said quickly. Too quickly. "This hotel has a flawless reputation." "Does it?" "Our guest satisfaction scores are among the highest in the region." "Are they?" Bruce felt something shift, something he couldn't name. The woman's questions weren't accusations. They were worse. They were inventory. Like she already knew the answers and was simply confirming what she'd heard. "Who are you?" The words came out sharper than he intended. Tracey didn't answer immediately. She looked around the lobby one final time, at the guests with their phones, at the staff frozen behind the desk, at security waiting for orders, at Bruce standing with his finger still raised like a weapon. "I'm someone who believes that character is revealed when people think no one important is watching." Bruce's jaw tightened. "Is that supposed to mean something?" "It means—" Tracey paused, her hand moving slowly toward her leather bag. "That I've seen everything I needed to see tonight." Bruce laughed, but the sound was hollow, uncertain. "You've seen nothing. You are nothing. And in about 30 seconds, you're going to be escorted out of this building by security, and tomorrow morning you'll be nothing but a story I tell at the next managers' conference." Tracey's hand slipped inside her bag. "We'll see," she said softly. What Tracey pulled out of that bag would end Bruce Wagner's career before the clock struck 10. But first, she needed the whole lobby to understand exactly what kind of man had been running their hotel. The leather folder landed on the mahogany counter with a soft, deliberate thud. It wasn't dramatic. Tracey didn't slam it down or make a show of the moment. She simply placed it there, the way someone might set down a menu or a room key, casual, unhurried, absolute. But the effect was immediate. Bruce's eyes dropped to the folder. The logo embossed on the cover caught the chandelier light, a stylized DH, intertwined with elegant script. Dianne Hospitality Group. His face went pale. "Where did you get that?" Tracey didn't answer. She opened the folder slowly, revealing a stack of documents. Letterhead, signatures, corporate seals. The kind of paperwork that never left executive offices, never touched hands below the C-suite level. "This," Bruce's voice cracked, "this is internal documentation. Confidential. You can't. This is theft, corporate espionage. I'll have you arrested." "Will you?" Tracey slid the first page forward. A quarterly performance report dated 3 months ago. Bruce's name appeared 17 times, each mention highlighted in yellow, each highlight connected to a complaint, a warning, an incident. "Page 1, Tracey said calmly. "Guest complaint from February. A black family of 4 was told their reservation had been lost despite confirmation emails. They were offered a storage closet as alternative accommodation." Bruce's mouth opened, closed. Page 2, March. An Indian businessman was asked to prepay for his entire stay in cash despite having a valid corporate account. The reason documented by staff. Tracey looked up. Managers, discretion. The lobby had gone completely silent. Guests who had been pretending not to watch were now openly staring. The woman filming on Instagram had moved closer, her viewer count climbing past 2,000. Even security had frozen, uncertain whose orders they should be following. Page 3, April. A complaint filed directly with corporate. "Stop." Bruce held up his hand, his voice thin and desperate. "Just stop. Who are you? How do you have these documents?" Tracey closed the folder gently. "I have these documents," she said, "because I requested them." "Requested them from who?" "These are confidential. From my executive assistant." Tracey's voice remained perfectly level. "Who pulled them from my corporate server, where they've been sitting for 6 months, waiting for me to decide what to do about them?" The words hung in the air. Bruce stared at her. Behind him, Patricia had gone rigid. Angela's hands were shaking so badly she had to grip the edge of the counter to steady herself. "My name," Tracey continued, "is Tracey Dianne. 6 months ago, I became the majority owner of the Grandview Imperial Hotel." Someone's phone clattered to the marble floor. The sound echoed through the silence like a gunshot. "That's—" Bruce shook his head rapidly, as if trying to dislodge water from his ears. "That's not possible." "The ownership transfer, we were told it was a holding company, a private equity firm, Dianne Hospitality Group." Tracey pulled out her phone, tapped the screen, and turned it toward him. "My holding company, my private equity firm, my hotel." The corporate profile glowed on the screen, her photograph, her title, her signature on the acquisition documents. Bruce stared at the phone, then at Tracey, then back at the phone. "Oh my God," Patricia whispered behind him. The elderly woman in cream near the seating area let out a soft laugh, not cruel, but satisfied. The sound of someone watching karma arrived precisely on schedule. "I came tonight without announcement," Tracey said, addressing not just Bruce, but everyone in the lobby. "No entourage, no press, no advance notice to management." She paused, letting the words settle. "Because I wanted to see how this hotel actually operates, how guests are actually treated. What kind of culture has actually been built here, not the version that gets polished for quarterly reviews and corporate visits." Bruce's face had cycled through pale, flushed, and was now settling into a grayish green that matched the marble columns. "Ms. Dianne," his voice came out strangled. "I had no idea. If I had known—" "That," Tracey interrupted quietly, "is exactly the point." She turned slightly, making eye contact with the guests who had witnessed everything. The young woman filming, the businessmen who had watched in uncomfortable silence, the elderly woman in cream who was nodding slowly. "You shouldn't need to know who I am to treat me with dignity." The words rippled through the crowd. Several women nodded instinctively, women who understood this truth in their bones, who had lived it in 1,000 different lobbies and boardrooms and doctors' offices and traffic stops. Bruce scrambled for footing. This was a misunderstanding. A terrible, unfortunate misunderstanding. I was trying to protect the hotel, protect our guests. "Protect them from what exactly?" Tracey asked. "From," he gestured vaguely, "from potential threats, from people who might be—" "People who might be what, Bruce?" He couldn't say it, couldn't complete the sentence. The words he had thought so easily, "don't belong, wrong floor, wrong life," suddenly felt like acid on his tongue. "I was doing my job," he managed weakly. "No." Tracey's voice hardened for the first time. "You were doing what you've been doing for 3 years. Profiling guests. Humiliating people. Creating a culture where discrimination isn't just tolerated, it's encouraged." She tapped the folder. 23 complaints, 6 written warnings, 0 corrective action. And tonight, you demonstrated exactly why those numbers exist. Bruce looked around desperately. At Patricia, frozen in horror. At security, who had taken a subtle step backward. At the staff behind the desk, none of whom would meet his eyes. "We can fix this," he said, his voice breaking. "I can fix this. Give me another chance. You had 3 years of chances. Tracey picked up the folder. You had 6 written warnings of chances. You had 20 minutes tonight to make a different choice. She looked at him with something that wasn't quite pity, but wasn't satisfaction either. It was the steady gaze of someone who had seen this exact scene play out too many times, in too many places, and had decided to stop watching. "Consequences," she said clearly, "begin now." Bruce's badge slipped from his trembling fingers and clattered against the marble floor. The sound echoed through the silent lobby like a verdict. The next 7 minutes would reshape the Grandview Imperial forever. But Bruce Wagner's termination was only the beginning of what Tracey had planned. Tracey let the silence stretch. Bruce's badge lay on the marble floor between them, gold lettering catching the light. Night manager. 3 years of authority, reduced to a piece of metal nobody wanted to pick up. "Before I announce any decisions," Tracey said, her voice carrying clearly through the lobby, "I want everyone here to understand what has been happening in this hotel." She opened the folder again. "This isn't about one bad night. This isn't about one misunderstanding. This is about a pattern, a culture, that has been allowed to grow unchecked for years." Bruce opened his mouth to speak, but Tracey continued without acknowledging him. "In the past 14 months, this property has received 37 formal complaints. Not about room service, not about amenities, about treatment." She turned a page. Guests profiled based on appearance. Guests questioned about their ability to pay despite valid reservations. Guests made to feel unwelcome in a space they had every right to occupy. She looked up at the crowd. 17 of those complaints came from black guests, 8 from guests of South Asian descent, 6 from Latino families, 4 from guests who simply didn't dress the way someone decided luxury guests should dress. The numbers hung in the air like an indictment. "And in every single case," Tracey continued, "the complaint was filed, documented, and ignored. No follow-up, no corrective action, no consequences." Her eyes found Bruce. The same name appears as supervisor on every incident. The same manager signed off on every dismissal of every complaint. The same person created the environment where staff felt empowered or obligated to treat certain guests as less than human. Bruce's face had gone the color of wet cement. "This isn't just about you," Tracey said, and something in her tone shifted, became almost gentle. "You're the symptom. The disease is deeper." She turned to the staff gathered behind the reception desk. Angela stood frozen, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. The concierge had pressed himself against the back wall, as if trying to disappear into the wallpaper. 2 bellhops exchanged terrified glances. "I watched you tonight," Tracey said. "All of you." The words landed like stones. "I watched one of you giggle when your manager humiliated me. I watched another pretend to be fascinated by a computer screen rather than intervene. I watched security materialize to intimidate rather than investigate." She paused. "And I watched one of you," her eyes found Angela, "try to warn him." A tiny shake of the head. A silent, "Don't." Angela's shoulders shook with suppressed sobs. "That tells me something important," Tracey continued. "It tells me you knew this was wrong. You knew, and you were afraid. Afraid of losing your job. Afraid of retaliation. Afraid of a man who had spent 3 years teaching you that his authority was absolute." She closed the folder. "Fear is understandable, but silence has consequences too." Tracey turned to address the guests who had witnessed everything. The young woman whose phone was still recording, the businessmen shifting uncomfortably in their designer shoes, the elderly woman in cream who watched with knowing eyes. I want to apologize to everyone here tonight, not as an owner, but as a woman who knows how moments like this linger. Her voice softened. I know some of you have experienced something similar, maybe not in a hotel, maybe in an office, a store, a restaurant, a doctor's waiting room. She looked at the women in the crowd specifically. You know what it feels like to be measured by someone else's assumptions, to be found lacking before you've said a single word. The silver-haired woman in cream nodded slowly, her eyes glistening. That ends here, tonight, in this lobby. Tracey straightened. Bruce Wagner, she announced, her voice returning to its clear, authoritative tone. Your employment with the Grandview Imperial Hotel is terminated, effective immediately. You will be escorted from the building. Your personal effects will be shipped to your home address. You are not to contact any staff member or return to this property. Bruce staggered backward as if physically struck. You can't. I have rights. I'll sue. You have the right to file whatever legal action you choose, Tracey said calmly. My attorneys will be happy to introduce your documented behavior into evidence. She turned to Patricia, who had been trying to edge toward the back office. Patricia Chen, assistant night manager, co-signer on 14 dismissed complaints. Your employment is also terminated, effective immediately. Patricia's face crumpled. I was following orders. That defense has never aged well. Tracey's voice carried no cruelty, only finality. HR will contact you before morning. She nodded to security. Marcus, please escort Mr. Wagner and Ms. Chen from the building. Marcus Thompson stepped forward, his face unreadable. He had been at this hotel for 7 years. He had followed Bruce's orders more times than he could count. But tonight, watching this woman in the green coat dismantle everything with nothing but calm and truth, something had shifted in his chest. Yes, ma'am, he said quietly. As Bruce was led toward the door, he turned back one final time. You'll regret this, he spat. You think you're better than me? You're just another— Goodbye, Bruce. The lobby doors closed behind him, cutting off whatever poison he had been about to spew. The silence that followed was different, cleaner, like air after a storm. Tracey turned to the remaining staff. This hotel will reopen tomorrow under interim leadership. Mandatory retraining begins immediately. New policies on guest treatment, discrimination reporting, and accountability will be implemented within the week. She paused, her gaze moving across their faces. Every single one of you has a choice right now. You can stay and learn. You can commit to being part of something better. Or you can leave tonight, no questions asked, with 2 weeks severance. Angela stepped forward, wiping her eyes. I want to stay, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I want to learn. I should have said something tonight. I should have said something months ago. I'm sorry. Tracey studied her for a long moment. Apologies matter. Actions matter more. She nodded. Show me who you want to be. Another staff member stepped forward. Then another. Tracey looked out at the lobby, at the guests watching, at the staff choosing, at the space transforming in real time. This hotel is going to change, she said. The question is, who's going to change with it? The grandfather clock in the corner began to chime. 10:00 p.m. A new hour. A new beginning. But Tracey knew that announcements were easy. Real transformation required something harder. Tearing out the rot by its roots and building something worth believing in. The lobby doors clicked shut behind Bruce Wagner with a sound that seemed almost anticlimactic. No dramatic exit speech, no final confrontation. Just a man in a rumpled suit being escorted into the Chicago night by security officers who had followed his orders for 3 years and would never follow them again. Tracey watched through the glass doors as Marcus guided Bruce toward a waiting taxi. Even from this distance, she could see Bruce gesturing wildly, his mouth moving in what was surely a stream of threats and excuses that nobody was listening to anymore. Then the taxi pulled away, and Bruce Wagner disappeared from the Grandview Imperial forever. Patricia had already been escorted out through the service entrance, quieter, less theatrical, somehow more final. Tracey turned back to the lobby. The staff stood in a ragged semicircle near the reception desk, their faces a catalogue of human emotion: fear, guilt, relief, uncertainty. Some couldn't meet her eyes, others couldn't look away. A few seemed to be holding their breath, waiting for the next termination, wondering if their name would be called. "The rest of you," Tracey said, "are not being fired tonight." The collective exhale was audible. "But I need you to understand something." She walked slowly toward them, her heels clicking against the marble. "Not being fired is not the same as being innocent." Angela flinched visibly. "Every person in this lobby made choices tonight. Some of you laughed at cruelty. Some of you enabled it through silence. Some of you participated in systems you knew were wrong because it was easier than speaking up." She stopped in front of the reception desk. "I'm not here to punish you for being human. Fear is human. Self-preservation is human. But tomorrow, and every day after, you will be held to a different standard." A young bellhop near the back raised his hand tentatively. "Yes, ma'am, Ms. Dianne." His voice cracked. "I've only been here 4 months. I didn't know it was this bad. I needed the job. I have student loans. I couldn't afford to—" "What's your name?" James Okonkwo." Tracey studied him. He was barely 22, with the anxious energy of someone who had spent his whole shift trying to be invisible. "James, did you participate in what happened tonight?" "No, ma'am. I was in the back. I didn't even know until—" He gestured vaguely at the chaos around them. "Then you're not who I'm talking to." Tracey's voice gentled slightly. "But you are who I'm talking about. New employees who walk into a toxic culture and learn that silence is survival. That's how places like this stay broken." She addressed the group again. "Starting tomorrow, this hotel will operate under new leadership. My executive team is already en route from Detroit. They will conduct individual meetings with every staff member over the next 72 hours. Tracey pulled out her phone and read from a prepared document. "Effective immediately. All guest complaints will be reviewed by an independent ombudsman. No manager will have authority to dismiss complaints without documentation and oversight. Staff who witness discrimination are required to report it and protected from retaliation when they do." She looked up. "Mandatory training begins next week. Not the kind of training where you watch a video and sign a form. Real training. Scenario-based. Uncomfortable. Designed to make you confront the assumptions you didn't even know you were carrying." The concierge, a man in his 50s named Gerald, who had been at the Grandview for 12 years, cleared his throat. "Ms. Dianne?" "Yes?" "I owe you an apology." His voice was steady but thick with emotion. "I saw what Bruce was doing tonight. I've seen it before. Many times. I told myself it wasn't my business. I told myself I was just the concierge. I didn't have authority to intervene." He shook his head slowly. "But that's not true, is it? I had the authority to say something. To call corporate. To refuse to participate. I chose not to." Tracey regarded him silently. "I'm 63 years old," Gerald continued. "I've been in hospitality my whole career. I've seen a lot of things I should have spoken up about. I didn't. And I'm ashamed." The lobby was completely still. "Thank you, Gerald." Tracey's voice carried genuine warmth. "That kind of honesty is rare, and it's exactly what this hotel needs more of." She turned to address the guests who had remained to witness the aftermath. Fewer now, but the silver-haired woman in cream was still there, along with the young woman who had finally stopped filming. "I want to thank all of you for your patience tonight. I know this isn't the experience you expected when you checked in." The elderly woman rose from her seat and walked toward Tracey with the careful grace of someone who had spent decades navigating rooms full of people who underestimated her. "My name is Eleanor Vance," she said, extending her hand. "I've been staying at hotels like this for 40 years, and I've never, not once, seen someone handle a situation like this with such composure." Tracey shook her hand. "I've been on the other side of that counter," Eleanor continued softly. "Different decade, different city, same feeling." Her eyes glistened. "Thank you for not letting it slide." "We've all slid enough," Tracey replied. Eleanor squeezed her hand once, firmly, then returned to her seat. Tracey looked around the lobby one final time. The crystal chandeliers still sparkled. The marble still gleamed. But something had shifted. Something intangible but unmistakable. Or maybe she was just hoping it had. Real change didn't happen in dramatic lobby confrontations. It happened in the small moments afterward, the daily choices, the quiet corrections, the accumulated weight of doing the right thing when no one was watching. And Tracey wouldn't be here to watch. She had a red-eye to catch, meetings in Detroit tomorrow, another property review next week, an empire to run. The Grandview Imperial would either rise to meet the standard she had set tonight, or it would fail. And if it failed, she would know. She always knew. "I have to go," she said quietly. Angela stepped forward. "Ms. Dianne, will you come back?" Tracey picked up her leather bag. "I'll be watching," she said. "Whether you see me or not." She walked toward the lobby doors, her green coat catching the chandelier light one final time. Behind her, the staff of the Grandview Imperial stood in the silence she left behind, facing a question that had no easy answer. Who did they want to be tomorrow? Tracey pushed through the doors into the cold Chicago night, the weight of the evening settling into her bones. She had done what she came to do. But as she hailed a taxi, a familiar doubt crept in. The same doubt that followed every intervention, every termination, every attempt to change a system that seemed determined to stay broken. Would it stick this time? 8 months later, the taxi pulled up to the Grandview Imperial on a Wednesday afternoon in late September, when the Chicago sky was that particular shade of blue that made the city look like a postcard. Tracey Dianne stepped out onto the sidewalk, her dark green coat, the same one she'd worn that night, buttoned against the autumn chill. She stood for a moment, looking up at the limestone facade, the brass-trimmed revolving doors, the elegant signage that still spelled out Grandview Imperial in letters that caught the afternoon light. From the outside, nothing had changed. But Tracey knew better than anyone that the most important transformations were the ones you couldn't see from the street. She pushed through the revolving doors. The lobby was exactly as grand as she remembered. The vaulted ceilings, the Italian marble, the crystal chandeliers throwing prismatic light across every surface. The hand-carved mahogany reception desk still anchored the space with quiet authority. But something was different. It took her a moment to identify it. The air was different. The last time she'd stood in this lobby, the atmosphere had been thick with tension, hierarchy, unspoken rules about who belonged and who didn't. Now, there was an ease to the space, guests moving freely, Staff engaging naturally, conversations flowing without the undercurrent of judgment she'd felt before. A young woman at the reception desk looked up and smiled. "Welcome to the Grandview Imperial. Checking in?" Tracey didn't recognize her. New hire, post-transformation. "Just visiting today. Of course. Let me know if you need anything at all." No hesitation, no assessment of her coat, her shoes, her right to be there. Just warmth. Tracey walked deeper into the lobby, letting her eyes wander. Near the concierge desk, she spotted Gerald, the 63-year-old who had publicly apologized that night. He was helping an elderly couple with theater tickets, his posture relaxed, his smile genuine. When he glanced up and saw Tracey, his face transformed. "Ms. Dianne." He excused himself from the couple and walked toward her, hand extended. "I didn't know you were coming. I would have—" "That's the point, Gerald." She shook his hand warmly. "I wanted to see it as it really is, not the version people polish for my visits." Gerald nodded slowly, understanding. "And what do you see?" Tracey looked around the lobby again. "I see a hotel that's learning how to breathe." Angela Chen found her 20 minutes later, in the small courtyard garden behind the main building. Tracey was sitting on a wrought iron bench, watching a fountain that had been dry and neglected 8 months ago. Now water cascaded over stone tiers, filling the courtyard with gentle sound. "Ms. Dianne?" Tracey looked up. Angela had changed, not physically, but in the way she carried herself, shoulders back, eyes direct. The trembling uncertainty of that night had been replaced by something steadier. "Angela, it's good to see you." Angela sat on the bench beside her, smoothing her manager's blazer, a detail Tracey noted with quiet satisfaction. "I wasn't sure you'd remember me. I remember everyone from that night." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the fountain. "I got promoted 3 months ago," Angela said finally. "Assistant front desk manager. I'm in charge of guest experience training now." "I know. I read your proposal for the new onboarding program. It was excellent." Angela's eyes widened. "You read that?" "I read everything." Tracey smiled slightly. "Old habit." Angela was quiet for a moment. Then, "Can I tell you something?" "Of course." "That night, when you looked at me and said silence was a decision, I went home and cried for 4 hours." She laughed softly, but there was weight beneath it. "I couldn't stop thinking about all the times I'd seen something wrong and done nothing. All the times I told myself it wasn't my place, wasn't my business, wasn't my problem." She turned to face Tracey directly. "You changed something in me that night. Not just this hotel. Me. I'm never going to be silent again." Tracey felt the words settle into her chest, warm and unexpected. "That's all I ever wanted," she said quietly. "Not for people to be perfect, just for them to choose differently when it matters." Before she left, Tracey asked Angela to show her something. They walked back through the lobby, past the reception desk, past the concierge station, to a small alcove near the elevator bank. It had been a dead space before, an awkward corner where guests dropped umbrellas and staff stored luggage carts. Now it held something else, a simple brass plaque, mounted at eye level, with words engraved in elegant script. "You shouldn't need to know who I am to treat me with dignity. Tracey Dianne, September 2024. Beneath it, smaller text. The Grandview Imperial is committed to treating every guest with respect, regardless of appearance, background, or assumption. Dignity is not earned. It is owed." Tracey stared at the plaque for a long moment. "Whose idea was this?" "Gerald's," Angela said. "But we all signed off on it. Every single staff member." Tracey touched the brass lightly with her fingertips. She thought about her mother, Dorothy, who had spent 31 years cleaning hotel rooms and teaching her daughter that dignity wasn't about what other people saw. She thought about the night she'd walked into this lobby, dressed simply, expecting nothing, testing everything. She thought about Bruce Wagner, whose name had become a cautionary tale in hospitality circles, a reminder of what happened when authority was confused with worth. And she thought about the women who had reached out in the months since the story went viral. Hundreds of them, thousands maybe. Women who had stood in lobbies like this one and been told they didn't belong. Women who had stayed silent when they wanted to scream. Women who had watched her Instagram video, the one filmed by a stranger named Jennifer that night, and felt something shift inside them. Change is possible. She had doubted it so many times, had watched properties revert to old patterns the moment she looked away, had wondered if her interventions were anything more than temporary disruptions in systems designed to stay broken. But this plaque, this courtyard, this staff member who had transformed from trembling bystander to training director, this was proof that something could stick. Silence protects injustice. And the opposite was also true. Voice, calm, persistent, unwavering, could dismantle it. Calm strength endures. Her mother had known that, had lived it every day of her working life, folding sheets with military precision, treating every room like a gift, carrying herself with dignity in spaces that often refused to see it. Tracey had learned it from her, and now, in her own way, she was passing it on. She walked out of the Grandview Imperial as quietly as she'd arrived. No entourage, no press, no announcements. Just a woman in a green coat, stepping into the Chicago afternoon, carrying with her the knowledge that one night, one moment of choosing to stand instead of leave, could change everything. The doorman, a young man she didn't recognize, held the door open and smiled. "Have a wonderful day, ma'am." "Thank you," Tracey said. "You too." She paused on the sidewalk, looking back one final time at the limestone facade, the brass doors, the hotel that had tried to reject her and was now teaching others how to welcome. Then she turned and walked into the city, a single thought echoing in her mind, the truth her mother had taught her, the truth she had defended that night, the truth she would carry for the rest of her life. Dignity isn't granted, it's defended.